Hello folks, I'm Pamela Young and this is Thrive 2030 brought to you by Growth Curve. Today I have with me Umar Swift, who is the Chief Executive of Bursa Malaysia, which is the stock exchange in Malaysia. Hello Umar, how are you today?
A very good day to you, Pamela, and thank you for having me on.
I'll just take a moment to introduce you to our viewers. So Umar, you were raised in Australia, went to Monash University, graduated there, worked for a few years at Pricewaterhouse, and then I think in the early 90s you came back up to Malaysia for some job opportunities and you've been there ever since, is that right?
That sums it up quite nicely.
Pretty
I came
long
back
stint.
and came back for 2 years and never left.
Oh, well you must like it then, I guess. It's fantastic.
Well, I was very lucky. I mean, home is where your heart is, and home can be anywhere you want. I mean, before I came back, I had a home. I mean, literally in my mind, I was working in Sydney, Melbourne, Kuala Lumpur, and wherever I got off the plane on any of those destinations, it was as if I was arriving home. It was always very nice.
Fantastic. Well, I can appreciate it. I mean, I've lived in Southeast Asia and I always felt very comfortable there, and I can see why you've made it your home for a lot longer stint. So as Chief Executive of Bursa Malaysia, I'd like to have the opportunity to talk with you today about the region, Malaysian economy, and of course, starting with Bursa Malaysia and how you have managed your way through the last 18 months of the pandemic, and then we'll talk a little bit about the environment of the region and going forward. Is that okay with you?
Of course.
Fantastic. So can I just ask you, where were you when you heard the news about this global pandemic, and how did that news land on you?
Well, at the time, I was in KL. We were all watching developments in Wuhan and the lockdown, and if we go back, that would have been 2020. Chinese New Year. Chinese New Year period. China was in lockdown. It was surreal in some ways to think no one could go anywhere during Chinese New Year period, and we saw that whole piece. So let's say the pandemic started emerging late 2019. We then saw it as, in our mind, at the exchange, what I like to call it, we have fairly large conferences, and we had one lined up for February.
Okay.
And we saw this. We saw the pandemic developing in China, and we thought, well, that's happening over there. That's not a problem that's going to come and impact us, and we can still do our conference.
Okay.
Some few weeks after that, we had already pushed our conference back out, hoping by April 2020 things would be back to normal. We went virtual.
No.
I mean, we just had to make that choice.
Yes.
And we just saw this pandemic evolving. And first time around, we did very well as a country addressing the initial outbreak. But what we now have is we now find ourselves in 2021, early August. Date stamping this piece today.
Yes.
Infections, new infections around about 20,000 a day, which I don't know, for our friends in the Antipodeans in Australia and New Zealand is unheard of.
Yes,
however, the Delta variant is
that's increased quite rapidly in the last few weeks since I spoke with someone else in Malaysia for the series. I think the number at that point 2 weeks ago was 13,000 a day, so that's a rapid increase.
And that was considered a very high number. So I think when you look at the pandemic, clearly, lives and livelihoods, you got to balance both. There's no easy solution to it because unlike, say, for example, in well-developed countries, we don't have a strong social security system. Social security, to a large extent, is your extended family.
What were the conversations with your leadership team in those first few months about the risks for the exchange and the people that work there?
Well, the exchange is an essential service. I mean, the free flow of capital, things have to run. Yeah. We've not closed down at all during the pandemic per se. So we have to immediately start thinking in terms of redundancy. What do we do? In the early stages of the pandemic, we watched single-digit if you like, infection rates and say, well, what does that mean to us? What do we do? We then introduced work from home, multi-sites. We started grouping ourselves into cells. We started, flirting with Zoom, WebEx. We've now landed on MS Teams. Not that it's a plug; it's the tool that works best for us. And we tried all these different ways of, was it telecommuting, for want of a better term, and adjusting. And just how do we keep people safe is the overall theme, Pamela.
Yes.
I mean, people are very concerned.
Yes.
I mean, so initially when you had the outbreak, we were not sure what we were dealing with. Is it on surfaces? Is it airborne?
Yes.
A lot of I used to call it hygiene theatre.
Okay.
And what do I mean by
lots
hygiene?
of scrubbing and wiping of surfaces going on at your place then?
And also this taking of temperatures and I'm not sure if they're doing it. Well, New Zealand doesn't have this problem at the moment, but we used to go into shopping centres and still do, and they take our temperatures. If you have a temperature, well, then you're clearly not asymptomatic. It is the asymptomatic cases that are a large majority of the greatest challenge.
Yes.
Because they're infectious.
Yes,
so there's this whole question of, I think I'd even say trust. You got to say who you're having a meeting with. Do we have meetings? At the moment, we don't, because we're trying to make sure we're keeping people safe.
Okay. So how do you communicate at work if you're not having meetings? You're all still working at home, doing it remotely?
I mean, at the moment, mains, if you like, main sites, for want of a better term, is about 30% occupancy. Okay. We have teams that are working remotely from home, and we have teams that are working from other sites.
Okay.
So we've actually rented space elsewhere, and so we don't commingle. So heaven forbid we have a team member who's infected, and it does happen from time to time because it is everywhere. We then isolate. The analogy I would use is rings of an onion.
Yes.
So as you look at it and you say, well, we have an infection, so then what we would then do is we would then swap out that team, sanitize the area, then the new team will come on and support, and therefore everything keeps running.
Umar, of the listed members of the exchange, what changes have you seen of, who are the winners and who are the losers, and are there some new players in the market?
No, it certainly is, Pamela. So, I mean, if you think about it, we look at 2020 market as, if you like, the first movement control order was put in place. The economy was suffering. There wasn't a lot of good news. And then we saw this rise of rubber gloves and healthcare, and because everyone had to, hygiene became a key factor. Sure. And Malaysia actually produces 80% of the world's production of rubber gloves.
A great fortune.
And some clouds do have a silver lining, and for the glove makers, it truly was a silver lining. And so they then were what we would call abnormally profitable, because their product is scarce, there is a lead time to produce. So if you like, demand is outstripping supply, so they were making super profits. This then drove the market. And in many ways, as we saw greater liquidity in the market, we saw a new group of investors. And what I mean by a new group of investors are actually retail customers, because traditionally our stock market has been driven by institutional players, pension funds. And on a given day today, 40% of the trades on the market are actually by retailers. Mums and dads, day traders, people investing for the medium term. Because traditionally, this market segment would probably invest through mutual funds.
Right.
So in a Malaysian context, we have something very similar to superannuation. So we have pension fund, we then have mutual funds, and then ultimately there is a group that wants to be self-determinant, and they will then be investing through on the stock market itself or in different investment products. And so you've seen this whole market if you like, has come alive. And, volumes last year, I mean, I'll talk in ringgit, and average daily volumes were about 4.2 billion ringgit a day. Now, to give context to that, in 2019, we're probably doing about 2.1 billion ringgit a day.
Wow, that's quite a big increase.
Yeah.
This is, are these all rubber gloves?
Well, no, it's over the whole market.
Yeah,
so what, if you like, healthcare becomes a catalyst.
Yes.
And then that's a call to action.
Yeah.
And then people see profitable trading, and there's a renewed interest in the stock market that perhaps wasn't there previously. I mean, I think prior to, if you like, this emergence of this new sector, or the re-emergence of the sector, because it has been with us for some time.
Yeah.
You would have seen, people investing in different classes of assets. Malaysians like property. I mean, they really like property.
Okay, but property. So you're saying that they've done property has done well throughout the pandemic?
I think I draw an analogy with perhaps Australia. Everybody wants, people do invest in property as an asset class. Traditionally, there are probably two asset classes you'd look at. It's either property or it's stocks.
The property in Australia and New Zealand has enjoyed the benefit of tens of thousands of nationals returning home, putting pressure on the rentals and the property to buy market, and the prices both have gone up because of the huge numbers of people returning. Those are the reasons for the impact of the prices of.
I mean, I just saw the growth in Sydney. It's phenomenal. I was expecting things to ease off and cool down, and it did initially, and now it's bounced back with some vengeance.
Exactly. Good place to have some investments for sure.
I wish I did.
Yes. What about exports and imports? Obviously the exporting of rubber gloves has been a major boom. Are there other major sectors that have been significantly impacted by
I think
changes?
Malaysia is fundamentally a trading nation. So what you have is you've got palm oil, you have oil itself. Of course, we've got you've got your rubber gloves. Then you also have intermediate manufactured goods, particularly for the electronics industry. That has done very well. There's been a lot of conversations about revenge shopping worldwide.
Yes.
And so if you're manufacturing intermediate goods, we are the factory that provides, if you like, the nation that provides intermediate goods that go into the finished goods that people wish to buy.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about the COVID pandemic, it disrupts supply chains. When supply chains are disrupted, that then provides an opportunity to take advantage of said disruption. Now, if you then disrupted as well and your supply chain is impacted, you can't take advantage of it. So that's a big challenge at the moment.
Yeah, supply chains, there's various views actually. Some people have reported to me that supply chains are impacted and they can't get the goods that they need from overseas, so they're having to find local suppliers. And then other people are suggesting that, planes are still flying even though the prices increased because there's no passengers on the planes, so the goods are having to pay for the, cover the costs. But the suggestion is that there are still plenty of products flying around the world, and there isn't a shortage of, resources for people in the supply chain. So I'm getting mixed messages.
If I could, I think clearly if you need chips for your engine management systems for your cars, there is a problem. That's true.
There's a problem.
Yeah, and so because they're ubiquitous, these little doodads that we put in our electronic consumables and so on, and there just isn't enough chips at the moment. And so that then, if you're missing one component of a motor vehicle which has thousands of SKUs, you're not going to be delivering that car. So there is a challenge there. Now, some things are not impacted the same way. there's a whole conversation about, can you get white goods? People are spending a lot of time and effort, refocusing on their homes. I think the big challenge, I think when I look at it, tourism is a very large employer throughout the world.
Yeah.
And it has tremendous spin-off benefits because, when people spend that money, it immediately goes into the economy. And you're employing someone and they're consuming something.
Yeah.
We visit a country and we want to enjoy ourselves, so we may go on rides, we look at things, we support retail, and all of that has stopped.
Mm.
I was having a walk, and I heard something I hadn't heard for a while. It was a jet plane flying through the sky.
I was just going to ask you about the airline industry because most airline industries are obviously still shut down, not operating. Their staff are, I think on gardening leave, many of them, and it's a sad situation for airlines, airports, travel, tourism, and of course also the entertainment sector, the restaurants and food sector. And I mean, in Malaysia, like most major Asian cities, there's a lot of street market, a lot of street eating, a lot of food is bought out, not a lot of cooking is done at home because it's fresh and affordable. And so I'm just wondering, are you seeing an impact on those companies, listed or unlisted? Those industries must all be suffering to some point.
I mean, the way I look at it is, or how I position it perhaps, Pamela, is that whole segment, listed or unlisted, has been decimated. You think about it, what your capacity to sustain is for how long? So you've had one lockdown, so you sustained, and you've burned your reserves of cash getting through that. Rent has to be paid, wages have to be paid unless you furlough your staff. But if you're running a restaurant per se, for example, one of your most valuable resources is your chef.
Yes.
And if you can't retain your chef, how long can you retain a chef if your chef is not cooking?
Yeah, exactly.
And the conversations. So we now have a situation where you can't dine in yet, although we're now looking at relaxing for those where there's double vaccinations and infection rates are under control, plus also looking at hospital beds availability. So there are different parameters.
There's a lot of messages here. The point that your social security, your social system is not as well developed as some Western nations, which have got more financial support for people. If these industries are decimated and these families' incomes are non-existent and there isn't this government support for those families, what's going to happen? How bad is it? I mean, 20,000 cases a day and rising. That's a challenging situation right now.
I'd like to think, I mean, the 20,000, there's been a bit of modelling, Pamela. I think we're reaching near the top of the modelling of the impact, but I think that the key focus is on contact tracing, testing. It is your asymptomatics of the real challenge, making sure we're on top of that. Making sure there are enough beds, enough medicine, treating those that are ill. And then, so that's, if you like, the lives piece. Then we have to take the livelihoods piece and say, well, we have various government support packages for SMEs, for individuals. And that being said, people still really do need to get back out to work.
Yes.
And how do we do that safely? And so I think there is a piece as we move forward with the pandemic that we're going to see focus on testing. Why testing? Because you think about if I'm running a retail mall, and let's just put out, I'm saying I don't have a mall, but if I had a mall and I want people to come to my mall, what's my messaging? My messaging is everyone who is, as a landlord, I will want all my lessees to have tested their staff. I mean, there should be an agreement how often they're tested, what are we doing to keep people safe? And so there's a confidence to come back out shopping, to come back out purchasing. The velocity of money has slowed down because people are not spending.
Mm-hmm.
Because, if you like, 1 ringgit or $1 is really just 1 ringgit or $1 because it's sitting in my wallet. But if I spend it, then someone else spends it, and then you have that velocity. So you have a multiplier effect.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we need to get back. We need to get people working. We need the economy driving. We need to take the opportunity presented by supply disruption to say that, hello, we're Malaysia, we can fill that niche.
So does the government have a plan in action to get people back to work?
It's being, if you like, they have a national recovery policy, a national recovery strategy, and they have. And so what you'll be seeing is some of those themes that I've touched on will be sitting in the national recovery plan, and it will revolve around vaccination, testing, contact tracing, and making vaccination is a very key part of it. But vaccination alone isn't, if you like, the one magic bullet. No matter, I do have a look at sort of the news around the world, and people do focus on vaccination, and it is important, extremely important. But the other piece is to also, vaccination does not make us bulletproof. I run a mall. How do I get people in the mall? Because Malaysia is warm, tropical climate.
Yes.
So people visit malls because they're air conditioned. You can see movies. You can do a bit of shopping. There's entertainment for the kids, and it's, if you like, it's a day out in a comfortable environment. Now we have to get that back, and so it's going to revolve around vaccination, testing, and making sure that environment is, safe.
Are there government stimulus packages for boosting industries, or what you've talked about is the sort of health regime, which is vaccines and making sure the hospitals can cope and keeping people safe and continue the social distancing. But from an economic point of view, from a growth strategy point of view, has Malaysian government instituted, or have they got a plan to support the growth of sectors that you're very strong in, to try and boost the recovery, to make the recovery faster?
I think it's slightly, my answer is probably slightly nuanced. I think that the support has been about riding out the storm.
Yeah.
For one of
I think a lot of countries are still in that phase, so that you're not alone there.
Underlying that is a transformation piece and moving the economy into, it's called My Digital, and so rolling out support to create more efficient industries. There is a lot of government support for SMEs to help them embrace digital solutions, generate efficiencies. But again, prime concern is safety, getting back and just turning things back on.
What about the region? If you look across Southeast Asia or Asia generally, what do you think are the opportunities? Who's grabbing growth opportunities at the moment that you can see?
Well, I think we have to look at what Vietnam has achieved and be, and take our hats off. Indonesia, very large domestic consumption drives their economy. Singapore, always interesting, small island nation, financial hub. So as you look at it, everyone's got it has different facets they're bringing to the market. And ASEAN is not a homogeneous product. So I think the real challenge, if you like, for Malaysia is to brand itself as a trading nation, which is what we are, and then we have aspirations to be a higher income economy. Is that path to a higher income economy is going to be driven by education and by technology? Now we have to be a little bit more efficient, a little bit faster, because our neighbours will be saying the same thing as well.
Well, Singapore, I think it's education and health. Those are their two stated, sectors for future growth, exports of services, investment. But of course, technology is an enabler for both of those, isn't it? And of course, the digital age, the whole internet thing started around somewhere between 95 and 2005. Those 10 years was when the internet really took off. And then since 2005, we've seen a development of many other technologies, and most major businesses and small businesses for the last decade have been doing some form of digital transformation. And in the last 18 months, that digital transformation has been tenfold faster than it was in the previous 18 years. Do you think that pace of change is going to continue? And what are Malaysia's major digital advancements that you are able to share?
No, it's not quite my space, Pamela, but we'll give it a go. I mean, I think many years, I started working, my first job was in 86.
PwC.
Yeah.
Is that the first job?
And first time I ever saw a fax machine.
I remember that day too. Just come out of uni, there was a fax, hello.
It was like magic. And this was on thermal paper.
It was magic,
and we were all just trying to work out how to put the paper in. And we used aerograms, and when we wanted confirmations that were binding, we'd have to type out a telex. And we'd make a mistake, and because it's a piece of paper, little holes punched in it, you'd have to do the whole damn thing again. And it was line by line we'd have to do it. Now today we're doing this piece, and we have a great body of distance between us, and as if we're in the same room. And this pace of change is just going to continue. It's not going to slow down.
That's true. How is it going to affect your business at the exchange? What opportunities do you have for digital servicing, digital products, digital pivots?
I mean, at the exchange, we're going to have to change the way we engage our investors, our customers. And I mean, we're like many exchanges, we're intermediated. We have brokers who talk to the investor. We then provide the marketplace. We run the marketplace, making sure the marketplace is fair and orderly. There's no shenanigans, all those things. So people understand when you do business on the exchange, if you're buying something that is delivered to you, if you're selling something, you receive your cash. So that, if you like, is our statement of intent, and that is our obligation, is to provide a fair and orderly market. As we move forward, we're going to see mobile devices have become so much more important. It's not about trading on your laptop. People are now trading using apps on their phones. And it's going to be about delighting the customer, be they an individual, be they an institution. It's going to be about ease of transaction, cost of transaction. And we have to embrace technology to do it. Now, at Bursa, for example, we do shares, we have derivatives, but we're not in, if you like, the crypto space. Now, why is that? Well, that's a little bit, it's philosophical to some extent as we watch the space develop. Now, why do people invest? People invest for growth and dividends. And so we're always looking and keeping that, if you like, that raison d'être is to provide growth and dividends. That's something people can see. Now, what we're seeing in the crypto space as that evolves is we're very interested in non-fungible tokens. What can be tokenized, asset-backed tokens. And so potentially what you'll then see is a relationship where we at the exchange will have equities, we'll have derivatives, and then we'll probably, and we're beginning to play in that space and look at the technology around it, non-fungible tokens, as well as just tokenized assets, and beginning to understand, well, how does that work? What does that mean to us? Bearing in mind we're an intermediated exchange, what is the role of our existing intermediaries, or do we have new intermediaries for these new asset classes? How do I make it efficient? What's critical mass? These are the questions we're asking. We look as an industry, everyone is beginning to explore this space and what does it mean? And what we're doing at the exchange is we're looking at, we have a proof of concept around a tokenized gold coin, just to learn and understand what it's doing. How will that perform? Could I take a tokenized gold coin, so you think of it as an investment product, so you could, rather than investing in gold per se, you invest in a coin. I then make it fractional. I then put a wallet on top of it, be it Apple Pay, Google Pay, or something along those lines. So Pamela, you've invested in coins, but as you see the value of those coins increase or decrease, depending on what the market for gold is, because there will be a direct causal relationship, you can then go buy a litre of milk because you have a wallet sitting on top of it.
Look, I think innovations in the financial services is ripe for the picking. I mean, the digital transformation across the financial services globally for a decade is really starting to produce some very innovative products, and the app brings them right into everyone's phone, so it makes everything much more accessible. And I think also the use of technologies like artificial intelligence and machine learning and IoT, these things are making it more competitive for all of you who are in financial services to find products and to reach out to customers and to get your share of the market, because there are some serious innovations going on, and it's good to hear that you're looking at a few new products.
What we want to do is, or my stated goal is, I want to bring the private banking experience to everyone without the cost.
How will you do that?
Technology.
Okay.
Because it's all about access. So the private banking experience is saying, Pamela, you're a special person, and we're going to make you pay for that privilege, but we offer you very interesting products that if you like, the average investor doesn't have access to. So these products may be high risk, may be low risk, they may have attributes that other products don't have. Now, it's bespoke. So how do I make something that's bespoke cheaper? Technology.
That's your job, Umar. Sorry, that was rhetorical.
Yes, it was.
Yes, I understand. Well, look,
so what we're going to use is we use the proofs of concept to understand DLT. We use proofs of concepts to understand, can I put it on the cloud?
Yes.
So for example, today, all my systems are actually in the building that this backdrop is in.
Yes.
Doesn't sit off-prem at a data center. It's not sitting in the cloud, but actually maybe 3 years from now, I'll be cloud-based. And I have all my redundancy floating on the cloud. And when you're not on-prem, you actually become more accessible because it's the Internet of Things. You can actually access it wherever you are with whatever device you have. And so if you were to hit Bursa today, you see we have a lot of all our learning is fundamentally online. They're packaged, and it's all about empowerment. So when you look at your retail investor and you're talking about democratizing investing, okay, big theme.
Yeah.
Everyone gets, and I think it's an appropriate thing. So democratizing investing, everyone talked about GameStop and they said, oh, that's democratizing investing. Teaching Wall Street not to oversell. Yeah, that's true, but that's actually not democratizing investing. I think democratizing investing is more. It's about inclusion. It's about accessibility. And I think that's going to be the key. So as we talk about accessibility, inclusion, and digital banking,
yes,
bring it into shares.
Yes, I do think the changes are going to be enormous over the next few years, but of course COVID is providing a challenge for the banking sector, but it is, spurring on these innovations. And because we can't see one another face to face, can't run our conferences face to face, it just means that we are going to have to use the technologies available to us to reach people. But I think it's also turning up the fuel on innovations, particularly in the financial services sector. Look, I think we could talk on and on for hours, couldn't we? But I've got to the point where I need to ask you that beautiful last question, which is, if you were the CEO of the world, pardon me, in the future, what would be the priorities for you? What would be top of mind for you to address in your first 100 days?
Difficult question. It'd be health and education.
Mm-hmm. Meaning?
Why?
What would be your objective?
You want it to be universal. And so it's actually probably 3 legs. When I look at health, I'm also thinking nutrition, particularly for younger minds. So I want younger minds challenged, to be excited, to learn. And as you look at education, and as we get better educated, I actually think the differences that we perceive become less. Mm-hmm. And so you begin to harness togetherness. And the power of one is multiplied. So at the moment, if you like, all those bad things, insulism, being bigoted, etc., racism is based on, if I may, in my humble opinion, it is really on lack of empathy, and that's driven by lack of education. As we become more open-minded, as we learn, we unlock that potential. We make sure young minds are well fed and nurtured, not just scholastically. So they have access. So they have access to healthcare, access to nutrition, access to education. That old adage: give someone a fish or teach them to fish. Mm-hmm. And that's really what it's about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Get that right. I think we will have a far more productive society.
Yeah, very good point. Thank you, Umar, for being here with us today on Thrive 2030. Thanks so much for sharing your time and your insights about what's going on in Malaysia and what's happening at Bursa Malaysia. Thank you so much, Umar Swift from Malaysia. Bye for now.
Thank you, Pamela. The pleasure is mine.
Thanks for being with us. Talk to you soon.